The US and Brazil are the two largest exporters of soybeans. China is the world's largest importer of soybeans.
Mhm.
China was buying all their soybeans from the United States just as a way to kind of make it up a little bit. Like, well, we got to buy the soybeans anyway. Why not buy them from the US to keep the US-China trade deficit under control so it doesn't become too politically toxic? Well, as soon as Trump threw on the tariffs, China retaliated by moving their soybean orders to Brazil. Stop buying U.S. soybeans. Well, that's not a phone call. I mean, you're talking about vessels, port facilities, agriculture, trucks. How do you get the soybeans to the ports? How many do you grow? Where's the fertilizer coming from? Et cetera, et cetera. And all those parties, the shippers, the cargo, the insurance companies, and so many people involved, banks, letters of credit, it's just a lot involved. They don't like short-term relationships. They say, okay, I'll do it. I want a 5-year contract. And China said, okay. So they reconfigured all those transportation lanes to get the soybeans from Brazil. All of a sudden, you're a U.S. soybean grower. You say, well, what do? Well, we started selling them to the Netherlands because the Netherlands needs soybeans too. So now instead of shipping them from like Port of LA to Ningbo and near Shanghai, we're shipping them from Port of Houston to, I don't know, France, or Marseille or someplace, or Rotterdam. So the point being, you completely scrambled all these supply chain relationships. I talked to the guy who, look, this is a worldwide endeavor, but he was probably the single most responsible individual for all the significant developments in the supply chain in the last 30 years. And he said to me, Jim, you have to understand, it took us 30 years to build it. We blew it up in 3 years. It's not going to come back overnight. It's going to take 10 years or more to rebuild it. And what I talk about in the book is supply chain 1.0, which is 1989 to 2019, and then supply chain 2.0, which kind of starts now, but is going to go indefinitely because it's going to take a long time to put this together. It's it's like dropping a vase and it breaks in 1,000 pieces. You can't put it back together. You got to go buy a new vase. And that's what's going on with the supply chain. There will be a supply chain, there always is, but the new supply chain will look very different from what we've just gone through. Because the whole 30 years, of period I'm describing, was built on efficiency. Lower cost, lower cost, lower cost. It was kind of the Walmart model. So yeah, just-in-time inventory, everyone knows about that. But there's something called cross-stocking. That's where a truck pulls up at a warehouse and you unload it. Instead of putting the stuff in the warehouse, you move it to another truck that then goes to a destination. The stuff never goes in the warehouse. Inventories are very expensive. They're costly to finance. You got to move the stuff around. It's called picking. Pick the stuff off the shelf with your. I used to drive a forklift, so I know a little bit about it. And put it on a truck. I used to unload trucks too. So hey, I've got 7 suppliers. Why don't I cut it down to 3 and do bigger contracts with each one and get lower unit costs? I've got 5 transportation lanes. Why don't I cut that down to 2, get everything to Los Angeles and Seattle, as the case may be, et cetera. And they did it for 3, and they got costs lower, and Walmart and Amazon were the champions of this, but everyone else was doing it. But they missed something. What they missed was that while they were getting those unit costs lower for consumers, there were hidden costs, and the main hidden cost was you were creating greater frailty. This whole system was subject to a massive breakdown. So what happens if you have 2 suppliers and they both go on strike? What happens if you have one port of entry and it's backlogged? What happens if you've got cross-docking in warehouses and there aren't enough trucks? There are 80,000. We need 80,000 drivers, Wish they'd hire them instead of these IRS agents. But the point being, it is breaking down all across the board. Now, can it be put back together? Yes, but the biggest difference between 2.0 and 1.0, and this goes by different names. Janet Yellen called it friendshoring, and Macron called it a constellation of nations club, if you will. So you'll still have trading partners, you'll still have outsourcing, you'll still have transportation lanes, but it'll be members only. It'll be basically democratic, kind of liberal republics, Western Europe, the EU, of course, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, India, I would expect to be included. Friendly nations, but China's out. We're decoupling from them. They're decoupling from us. This isn't U.S. driven. The U.S. is participating, but this is what China wants too. Both sides are decoupling as fast as they can. China can develop its own network, maybe Central Asian republics, some Southeast Asian suppliers and so forth, but they're going to lose customers. Well, most of their customers actually in the United States. We won't buy their stuff and we won't sell them our stuff, particularly high tech stuff. So the world's going to break, and these new clubs are going to be formed, and there will be trade and there will be transportation lanes, but it'll be much more restrictive. Now, will prices be a little higher? Yes, but it'll be more secure. So the way I describe that, if you buy insurance on your house, or I buy insurance on my house, you don't want your house to burn down. You hope it doesn't. But if it does, you don't think your insurance premiums are a waste of money. Like when you write that check, you're like, that's money well spent. When you pay higher prices for consumer goods, the delta between the old price and the new price is your insurance premium for a more reliable system. And also, there's a big national security component to this. And I talk about Russia and Ukraine and China in the book. So that's all. So how the supply, what the supply chain breakdown means, chapter 1, chapter 2, what caused it, and we talked about that, and 3, where is it going, what are the constraints, and we talked about that. But then my editor, who's love working with us, she said, well, Jim, got to be a chapter on inflation. I said, of course we do. The supply chain breakdown is causing a lot of the inflation we see, and I'm going to write another chapter on deflation. And everyone's like, wait a second, why are you talking about deflation? That's coming next. People are not ready for it. I know the inflation's here. I buy gasoline. I shop in the grocery store. I get it. It's persistent. It's not transitory. I understand all that. But inflation has 2 major sources. One is the supply side, which is called cost push inflation. So that's energy price shocks, the stuff we're seeing coming out of Ukraine, fertilizer shortages, strategic metal shortages, component suppliers who can't deliver stuff to factories in Germany and they're shutting down, et cetera. The other cause is from the demand side, and that's called demand pull inflation. Basically, it's psychological. Consumers pull demand forward. They're like, hey, I was thinking of buying a refrigerator. I better buy it today because the price is going to go up in 6 months. And in the 70s, we had both. It started with cost push with the Arab oil embargo, but it ended up demand pull. I was starting my career at the time. Your boss would just give you a raise. You didn't even have to ask. Inflation was going up so fast. Like, I better give this guy a raise. Like, here's another, $30,000 or whatever, because people would quit. And that sort of spun out of control until Volcker squashed it all. Right now, we do not have demand pull inflation. We don't. This is not what's going on. We do have cost push inflation. The difference is hugely important because cost push inflation from the supply side, which is, again, when I talk about in the book, it's real, prices go up, but it's self-negating. The old saying that, the cure for higher oil prices is higher oil prices, because when they get too high, people stop driving. They shut down various activities. By the way, if you're unemployed, you're not buying any gasoline because you're not going anywhere. I mean, that's kind of a nasty way of putting it, but that's how cost push inflation, tips into a recession, and then prices come down. And we saw that in 1974. You had Jerry Ford and Alan Greenspan walking around with they had these win buttons, WIN, was so for whip inflation now, except we had a recession and prices collapsed. Now it came back by 77 with for a lot of reasons, but right now we don't have demand pull, we have cost push. It will go away when this economy goes into recession. And then we're going to be talking about disinflation and deflation, which are, kind of close cousins. And the Fed's going to be out on a limb as usual, raising rates in the face of a recession and a price collapse.